We're going to talk about the number one thing that leads to low sexual desire, and that is pressure, actually. We'll take a deep dive into pressure, how you get to a situation where there's pressure, and then definitely what are the interventions to reduce the pressure. Let's start with Lisa and Steve. They came in because Lisa had lost her desire to the point that she would say things like, I wouldn't care if I didn't have sex ever again. And Steve, his position has been like, I've been in this thing, this like very bad place sexually with Lisa for years where we can't talk about sex. If we do have sex, it's very rarely, and she really isn't there when we have sex. I really don't think she likes it. I don't think she likes me. And then Lisa on her part is like, oh my God, I love you. I want to give you this thing that you most desperately need, and everybody's telling me I should give it to you. But that's so much pressure, especially when I don't feel like doing it. So most of the time that I'm doing this is just to get it over with, to please you so that you're not upset. And that is like such a negative, non-sexy place to be with sex. And it creates all this pressure on Lisa to be there for Steve because he should have that and because she wants him to have that. But it's really at the expense of her desire, because the more pressure we feel to do something and the more we push ourselves to do it, the less we're going to want to do it. What do you do if you're in this situation? There's low sexual desire, and you can identify that it's caused by both people feeling, pressure. What pressure that one feels to have sex and then kind of pushing yourself to have sex. It's a very different pressure than the pressure. I'm always the one managing our sexual relationship. I'm always the one, feeling the pressure to make it good, even though it's obviously not, and to keep this thing going. But the thing is that the person that pushes themselves sexually because of the pressure has a different consequence. Almost anything that's involved with sex where you're pushing and there's not a lot of consent there, that creates negative associations. It just affects your body in a very different way. What do? You have these two people that are very, very dissatisfied and hungry for some connection. The first thing you need to do is, obviously, if the problem is pressure, the solution is less pressure. Take the pressure off. So then we think about, how do we take the pressure off? Well, one very fast and straightforward way to take the pressure off is to say, listen, I'm not going to expect sex from you. I'm actually going to back off and let you come to me. Pressure off right away. But this presents with some issues, because as soon as you say that, the first person that's going to object is the person with the higher desire, because they're going to say, like Steve did, listen, if I pull back, nothing's going to happen. Nothing. And I've even tried it before. I've tried doing this and nothing happens. It's been a month or two and nothing happened. And I'm like, yeah, I do realize that. But the difference is that while you are pulling back, that person in some way needs to be very gently and lovingly welcomed and invited into a space. The other person needs to feel motivated to move closer to you. So it's not just you pulling back, but also that person, where does she or he find the motivation to move closer to you? What does that person need in order to move closer to you or want to move closer to you? So if you don't do both, then nothing's going to happen. So what do? Again, you remove the pressure. So you remove the pressure by taking away the expectation of sex to raise your desire from an organic place. But in the end, it's whatever that person feels comfortable with too. So maybe it's just about adjusting some things. Instead of saying, I need to come to you, you can come to me, but you need to be very clear on the fact that if I say no, that it actually should be a celebration and not a place of rejection, as much as you can control, because rejection is a place that sometimes we can't control, that we go into. But if you can control it, to be able to control it, because if I say no and you go into this weird place of whether it's anger or removal or like kind of aloofness, then I can't feel motivated to come close to you. And it sucks because at the beginning, it feels like the person with the higher desire, even though they've been through all this stuff, they really suffered because they haven't gotten the sex that they want or they need, and they feel rejected and they feel not desired. And so now, asking them like to do more of that, but even with stricter guidelines and on top of it, to be okay with it, like what I say, become zen about sex. They look at me sometimes, I feel really bad because it is a lot to ask. I understand that, but it's actually the only thing that works in my experience. You need to remove the pressure. This all makes sense to you, right? Like, you need to remove the pressure. So let's do something about it. And for you to feel like okay through this process, but to be validated because it is difficult. It's asking a lot, but it might be the thing that works. So set in your mind some sort of time frame, like I'm going to do this for 6 months. I'm going to do this for a year. I'm going to do this for 3 months. I'm going to become really zen about sex. I'm not going to be mopey and dopey because I haven't gotten sex. I'm not going to get angry about not getting sex, because what we're trying to do is remove the pressure completely from this person so that they can start to understand what they want sexually. You have to create that space for them, or at least help them create that space, because they need to take that space too. All right, so you take the sex off the table, you becoming zen about sex. Then on top of that, you need to stay connected to this person because she needs, or they need to feel like you're flirting with them, like you're giving them some sort of energy, or else they're not going to be inspired. So if you say, okay, I'm going to become zen about sex, but I'm just going to sit here and just be, become the Buddha for like the next 3 months, that's not going to do it. That person needs you to interact with them in a very sexy, appealing way so that they can start to like, oh, wow, I kind of like you right now. Maybe I can follow through with this feeling. But there's no way they're going to feel like, I really like you right now if you're not showing up in some cool way, right? So that's the job of the person with a higher desire when we're removing pressure. Then we have, okay, what is the other person responsible for? And it sounds super easy, like, oh, well, they just get to do what they've been doing all along, not having sex, not really thinking about it, not really doing anything about it. That is so far from the truth. First of all, the person with the lower desire is continuously thinking about sex because their partners usually don't let them forget about it. Or even if they have a partner that also kind of dissociates from it and forgets about it or doesn't say something because for whatever reason, they feel so much internal self-guilt and self-responsibility for this piece that they're not having sex. Like they can't even tell their friends, hey, I haven't had sex in 2 years. That would be like, what? No, they probably haven't told a single soul that. So it's on their mind. They know they have to address this thing here. But the thing is that they can't. They don't have the tools with which to do that. So what's the job of that person? That job of that person that has a lower desire is first to relax and to enjoy some of the taking off of the pressure when your partner pulls back a little bit and really, your body starts to relax a little bit and enjoy that space, to breathe a little bit. And then after that, to be able to start to ask yourself, what do I want in this space? What do I want in this space right now? Because just because I may not want penetrative orgasmic sex, I might want something else. And most people say, I want to have some fun with you. I want to connect with you. I want to just touch and cuddle and kiss. A lot of people are very satisfied with just that. So that's one thing. The person with the lower desire starts to, ask themselves that question. What do I want? Do I want them to sit closer to me? Do I want them to hold my hand when we go out? Do I feel more connected and more joyous when we're dancing rather than eating? So it's an exploration with some type of guideline as to what do I want in this space? Now that I'm free of the pressure, what do I want? And then how do I express what I want? Because if you haven't been expressing what you want sexually or romantically or relationally for a really long time, even though you may become aware of what you need and what you want, it's really hard to express it. First, probably because all the space was taken up by something else and you couldn't express it. And second, expressing it was dangerous. And third, expression of your needs and wants, especially if you're a woman, is not going to come easy. That's the next step. Like, okay, I'm figuring out kind of what I want. Then how do I tell you what I want? Especially if our history is so conflictual with this particular topic. I'm taking a huge risk by saying, hey, I've been even thinking about this, because in my experience, as soon as I either mention sex or say that you look good, your pants are dropped and you're ready to have sex. It's that fast. I don't have any room there. So that's why it's hard to express. But it's good to express this stuff, because not only does it help you kind of identify, because it's not only just what you're thinking and feeling, but also when you express something and you interact with somebody else, you get information back. So it's not you living in a bubble. It's also super important to express these things for your own sake, for your own enjoyment of it, because it's super fun to tell somebody that they look good or that you're into them, right? So that piece is really important, because your partner starts to understand, first of all, what the process is now, because they're super anxious. Not that you're the first thing you want to learn is that you're not responsible for their anxiety. But it's still nice to start to give them something that you eventually want to give them anyway. If you're capable of it, if we're going there and it's actually going to get us to feel less pressure, then let's do it. So expressing the moments first that you feel like, I like you. Like right now, I'm really liking you because you're showing up in this way, or because we're doing this thing. And suddenly I feel attracted to you. I feel pulled by you. I feel like I want to be closer to you. And if I'm feeling that organically, and especially if we're creating the situations that will help us feel that way, then I should express it so that the other person understands where I'm at. And also because it fills that need for being desired and for feeling connected. In that exploration and expression of what you want and what you need, so you can start to understand how your particular sexual drive works. And you should see the video on spontaneous versus responsive desire, because that's one of the major reasons why this is happening, because you have two very different desires and they work differently. That responsive desire that usually belongs to the person with the lower desire has certain things that you need to know in order to make it work. It's just not on all the time. So you have to figure out like, well, when does it turn on? And this is the process that I'm talking about. Like, what do you want? What do you need? What kind of experiences do you want to test out and see what comes up from there? So we talked about stopping having sex that you don't want to have. We talked about pulling back and becoming really zen about this situation. We talked about also showing up for that other person in a way that is fun, exciting, engaging, loving, all that stuff, so that that other person feels inspired by you. Also, expressing that you're having a difficult time and this process is so difficult and that you don't believe in it and, you've lost hope. All these things in traditional couples therapy is what you're supposed to do, is what's good to do. In this particular situation, expressing your dissatisfaction and your anger and your sadness, all that stuff to your partner, when that is the most pressuring piece of this whole dynamic for them, then that's not going to be conducive to where we want to go. So find somebody else to talk about this. Don't shut yourself down from talking, but find somebody that's not your partner, because right now, eventually, of course, you go back to that, but right now that's not possible. It really helps to know how to regulate your feelings if you're going to become zen about sex, especially when it's been really hard. How do you regulate? And there's different ways to regulate your emotions, but that's a huge part of what you're going to be focusing on. How do I regulate these feelings that come up for me without having it, to put too much pressure on my partner or on our sexual relationship? And I'll have some videos up on emotional regulation, but basically what you want to do is, instead of, making the feeling go away, you really want to engage with the feeling and stay with the feeling. You want to have an understanding that sex can stop and start at any moment, that's okay, because that allows that person to kind of play around with the space. Hey, right now I just want to kiss you, but I don't know if I want to go all the way. Yes, rather than, no, if you kiss me, we have to have sex. Well, guess what's going to happen? That person is only going to kiss you when they know for sure they want to have sex. And that, with this type of desire, it doesn't happen that way. Why are you going to miss out on all the kisses that don't lead to sex? As you have both people working on this in different ways, and there, you have one person really starting to express positivity and connection, and that mood changes somewhat. That person is starting to engage in what they want and what they need, and it feels really good. And so there's some movement there. You also want to create some concreteness to it. It's not just about emotions and thoughts. It's also about, like, what do we do, sustain or promote these thoughts and emotions. The idea of the first date works spectacularally, because after a while, especially when you have conflictual relationships, you stop going on dates, first of all, and then they're definitely not like first dates. It's usually like, oh, where do you want to go tonight? Instead of what happens on the first date. Well, first, the invitation is completely different. We go like, hey, I found this really cool place. I think you're going to love it. And I just know you're going to love it. Can we go on Friday night? And then you show up and you're looking good. You're smelling good. You're super nice. You want to attract that person to you. You want in some way to have them eventually have sex with you too, So you're going to show up in ways to invite that in. Not the way that we show up after 10 years. It's like, where do you want to go? And even if we're having a good time and we're talking about the kids and the dog and the house, all that is perfectly pleasant, but it's not first date material. It's not very exciting. And sometimes it could be actually the contrary to that. So being able to think of, like, if I was on the first date, I would not be talking about my kids or the dog or the house. It just wouldn't happen. Maybe a little bit, but we definitely wouldn't spend much time on it, because that's not sexy, or I don't know why, but we just don't talk about it. So you show up and you try to be, try to produce some good conversation and make that person laugh and really feel connected and be curious about them and tell them about you and have fun. That's the whole point. So now, to be able to schedule fun rather than sex is hugely important, and to think of it always as, I'm going to eternally be on a first date. I wish somebody would tell us from the very beginning that, if we're going to be with somebody long term, it's a series of first dates over and over again to keep it sort of alive. And the first date definitely doesn't have like expectations of sex. There are plenty of first dates that are about sex. But most of the time you're going in there to figure the other person out. And if it leads to sex, great. But the expectation is not sex, right? You're also not going to go to a first date and just grab somebody's boob, right? There's a series of steps before you go there. And it's the same idea. Like, I think a lot of people think like, I just grab your boob or your pussy and then, here we go. You're ready. Most women find that very displeasing. A couple of them like it, but most of them do not. They don't like to be groped at out of the blue. It's a problem with some approaches that want to intervene with somebody with a low sexual desire when there's a mismatched libidos is that they do more pushing in a way. And we don't need any more pushing in this scenario. We need less. We need less pressure. But maybe you go to, you engage in some other form of therapy and it's about like, okay, let's find a way where we can increase your desire. And so let's go straight at that and do it in a very to-do list type of way. Like make sure you're engaging in self-care. Why don't you start exercising? Why don't you start looking at some porn? Why don't you start masturbating? And all that stuff to the person that has a lower sexual desire is like more homework, more heavy shit that I gotta do in this place. And when I don't feel like doing it, and maybe I feel like self-care, maybe I feel like getting a massage and having a bubble bath, but it's not connected to sex. The lower desire person does not want to engage in more things that they should be doing, especially because they become the identified person that there's something wrong with you. And most of the time it's a relational issue. It's not an individual issue. And so now, I'm going to therapy that's saying, okay, no, it's you. They don't even see the relational issue, or they want to focus on this particular person and how they should increase their desire in order to meet the needs of the person with a higher sexual drive. Because guess what? In our society, the higher sexual drive you have, the more important, the more valuable you are, the more kick-ass you are. And so no one is going to challenge the thing that's up on our, the pedestal of our value system. Nobody's going to challenge the people that have a lot of desire. They're going to applaud them. But the person often with the lower desire, not only is she judged by others, but she judges herself or himself as like a piece of shit compared to the person that has the higher desire. So it doesn't work because of that. And it doesn't work because pushing yourself to do something sexually, and sexual could be anything from like, flirting, masturbation to, swinging from the chandeliers, anything. You don't want to push yourself more to do that. You want to actually do the opposite. And that's why traditionally these approaches don't work, especially don't even get me going on the sunset focus. So, oh my God. And I'm sure some people have it, use it and it's good. It's this like, okay, so let's sit on the couch, maybe get close to each other. Maybe we do some, I touch you all clothes on for a little while till I'm comfortable with that. And then maybe you touch me with clothes on until I'm comfortable with that. So it's a slow progression of this. And all the while, this person is feeling, yes, here I am again, doing the thing that I don't want to do, and it feels bad. It feels yucky. It feels like I'm trapped. I'm going to read this case example because I can't remember all of it. Margaret came to see me after her fiancé issued an ultimatum. If you don't sort out your sexual issues, he was going to leave her. He made it clear that he wasn't willing to get married if their sexual relationship didn't improve. Upon delving deeper into the situation, it became apparent that Margaret, like many women, had been engaging in sex not out of the desire, but as a means to avoid conflict or to appease her fiancé. She was having sex to get him off her back or to prevent him from becoming upset rather than because she genuinely wanted to. Her fiancé, Toby, when he learned this, that she was engaging in this type of sex with him, his reaction was a mix of frustration and concern. He expressed that he didn't want her to feel forced into having sex when she wasn't interested, but he also emphasized that he had needs he felt they were going unmet. This put Margaret in a difficult position. On one hand, she didn't want to lose Toby or jeopardize their relationship. On the other hand, she was becoming increasingly repulsed by sex, to the point where she thought of being intimate with him caused her anxiety and dread. Margaret was trapped in a cycle of obligation and resentment. The more she felt pressured to have sex, the more she recoiled from it. This dynamic not only strained their sexual relationship, but also began to erode the emotional connection between them. Toby's ultimatum, though rooted in his own frustration, added to the pressure Margaret felt, and it ended up making her feelings of repulsion worse. As we explored her feelings in therapy, it became clear that Margaret's aversion to sex was not only about the physical act, but was deeply intertwined with her emotions and sense of self. She felt inadequate and guilty for not meeting Toby's expectations, which only deepened her disinterest in sex. This created a vicious cycle where the more she felt obligated to have sex, the more disconnected she became from her own desires and needs. Margaret didn't know what to do. She felt torn between wanting to satisfy Toby and maintain her relationship and her growing discomfort with sex. The therapy sessions focused on helping Margaret understand that her sexual desire, or lack thereof, was a valid part of her experience. We worked on disentangling her sense of obligation from her sexual encounters, allowing her to start reclaiming her autonomy in the relationship. Margaret engaged in sex more out of obligation than desire, leading to a complete shutdown of her sexual interests. Her eventual rejection of sex, accompanied by statements, "I hate sex, I think it's disgusting, I'm done with it," highlights the profound impact of ongoing coercion and trauma. This rejection serves as a self-preservation mechanism, protecting her from further emotional harm. Toby's role in this dynamic also was crucial. He needed to understand that pressuring Margaret into sex, even indirectly, was contributing to her aversion. The challenge was to find a balance where both partners' needs could be acknowledged and addressed without resorting to ultimatums or coercion. We aimed at rebuilding the relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and open communication, rather than obligation and resentment. This involved helping Toby recognize the impact of his demands and assisting Margaret in finding her voice to express her true feelings and needs without fear of losing her relationship. The goal was to foster an environment where both parties felt heard, valued, and free to be themselves, ultimately leading to a more fulfilling and consensual sexual connection.